In 2018 we saw the space go up to $1 trillion in market cap, and then back down to like 100 billion, very small spot market. BTC, Ethereum, as assets, they don't have natural yield. Leverage is limited, and I think yield and leverage is something that's the space needs to grow, and starting to see some solutions for that. Options, forwards are being traded OTC. The futures market getting more interesting as well. So what we've seen and what we've been focusing on is growing the options market, both OTC and on existing platforms, trying to create clearing solutions, and trying to create standardization and more institutional type of trading for options.
So it's interesting. You just mentioned setting up these clearing platforms. Is that already in place? Is the demand there already, or is it something that will come after the structure is in place?
The demand is definitely there. In the space you have a lot of guys who are still holding balance sheet, looking for yield in the balance sheet. The speculators are going to come in with leverage. So the demand is definitely there. But the platforms right now, I think the infrastructure is limited. So the short answer is no in terms of central clearing, but working on it.
So for derivatives, we'll probably touch more on that later in the panel. Maybe we'll go over to Chris. I know, Chris, you have a big presence, I guess, outside of Asia, so such as Europe. Maybe you can share some regional color on what's going on over there.
I think similarly to Asia, latter part of last year was very difficult for all of us in the States. We've seen a serious uptick in interest, both on more plain vanilla type of inquiries and also on the options. And I agree that there's demand, there's certainly interest. We spent a lot of time pricing stuff on a lot of trades. And another thing that we've noticed in the last few weeks, strangely enough, is an uptick in inquiries from token issuers looking for market maker. That space dried up significantly in the second half of last year. And we pivoted more towards providing liquidity to exchanges. But in the last several weeks, a lot of these token issuers have started approaching us again.
That's interesting. So you would think that in a kind of bear market, projects won't have as much capital lying around to pay for market making. Same for exchanges. I guess there's always these rebate programs that I'm sure you're very well aware of. Has this been something that's kind of growing, where they reach out more for more liquidity?
Unfortunately, the market making space has become very crowded with firms who sell themselves as market makers. And I don't know how to put this in a positive light, but I think a lot of these so-called market makers haven't developed the necessary tech and infrastructure to really serve as a market maker and provide liquidity. The standards are really quite low still. We still get approached by token issuers who ask us how much volume we can guarantee. That's not my job.
Right.
The only way you can guarantee volume is if you're creating it out of thin air. It's called wash trading, and that's a big no-no.
Right.
So I feel like it's important during this quiet period for all of us who are in it for the long run to try and improve standards, to focus on quality, to try and stamp out the bad actors. Because at the end of the day, we want crypto to become a legitimate alternative asset class. And all those institutional players who supposedly are waiting to come in, they're not going to take the deep dive until we clean up our act.
So Wade, for OSL, obviously you're facing a lot of these institutional grade clients. And Chris made a great point on kind of fake volume, basically illegal activities going on in the space. What's it like? Do they must be concerned. OSL as a counterparty, do they work with these kind of exchanges that promote such activity, or is that a big no-no?
Good question. I think as I look around the room here today and compare it to what it was last year when it was a massive amount of hype, the ICO craze was in full swing, and I think a lot of the questionable activity that we're referring to was really in full flight then. And going back to your question originally, which was how do we see the flows change and whatnot, I think that the ICO, redemption into fiat flows have certainly been something that's tailed off, and quite frankly, we expected that and planned around it. But the space has definitely matured, and one thing that we are seeing more of than ever is real interest and real commitment from actually household names and household brands in the traditional finance space. Are they fast to move? No. But have there been very material decisions made at the most senior levels of some of these organisations to commit and actually develop not only a custody offering, but also a trading offering? That to me is super exciting, right? And I think a few things have really led to that. Actually, part of that crazy activity was actually good in that it brought this asset class into the public domain. It was the subject of dinner party discussions. It was thrust into the limelight. So financial institutions were required to step up and look at it. Now they're getting a better understanding for the underlying technology, what could be possible, and in the same way that traditional FX, traditional equities have become electronic and more digitized, I think that they're seeing now that the potential to leverage this technology to do the same and be the fabric of the traditional asset classes going forward. So part of our strategy is really as a software as a service provider to engage with these traditional financial institutions who really don't know how to execute their strategy and provide them with the support to do that. And when the brands like Fidelity come to the space and commit to providing a custody product, to me that is what's going to drive sustainable and long-term adoption. And I think even though the room's like a quarter full and people are feeling pretty down in the dumps, that to me is actually the most encouraging thing longer term. Much more exciting than the craziness of last year.
So just more than institutional interest, it feels like, you mentioned that they were kind of forced to look at it last year during a very hyped market. Now that things have calmed down, they have some time to, I guess, take a breath and really look at like fundamentals first, sort of infrastructure and the actual technology. So in a way, does that mean in terms of new money coming into the space, it'll be a very progressive, gradual, maybe over a few years, rather than, institution herd is coming this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be in a much more organized and less chaotic fashion. However, assuming we do get that real institutional adoption at some point, the size and scale of the adoption is something we haven't seen before. We won't be talking about $1 trillion asset class. Like, if you look at global FX, or it's $130 trillion in monetary supply or something. But there's huge orders of magnitude that we haven't seen yet. So for the people who are, Chris's point, people are really committed to this asset class and actually have built sustainable business models and are there, I think our best days are well and truly ahead of us. Look at JP Morgan's coin. For a massive organization like that to tiptoe their way into that space is a big step. And even though the way they've used the technology is more to protect a current or an existing business that they have, it's a real, to me, it's somewhat of a watershed moment. We're seeing it in Japan as well now. Like, it's not if it's going to happen. This is happening in front of our eyes. As I said, best days are ahead.
Thanks, Wayne. Steven, so I think HKG has a bit more of a unique flows. It's a little different to, I guess, what OSL and Chris would be seeing at GSR. So maybe share a bit more about your region. What areas you see a lot of flows coming from.
Okay, sure. So we actually based in US. So I think the advantage of being like US, we have better regulatory environment. We have strong capital, and certainly we have much better human resources to build those OTC and DMM teams. But I'm more focused on the Asia Pacific area. So when we trace back in the history, like back in 2,000 years ago, blockchain already existed in China. So when the Chinese emperor has so many concubines, I mean so many wives, 3,000 wives. So how do they like take a note of each bloodline has been passed on? So when the emperor need a wife today, so the servants will take notes, and the ties on temple will also take notes. And so it will pass on. You cannot like change the records, but you can trace back to the history. Well, 10 months ago, the emperor like sleep with this concubine. So blockchain already existed 2,000 years ago in China. Obviously, this is an old Asian market, very good market since all the exchange founders are, we can say it's Asian-based, maybe not from the Binance, but also from the OTC side, we see lots of Chinese companies are focused on the quant trading and high-frequency trading. And the mining, not mentioned mining companies, which are like Big Man and like Jiangnan Yunzhi, S9. So from my opinion, that we swing more like in the supply side of the Bitcoin maybe, or any other any other altcoins. Maybe in US, with them more like swimming in the demanding side of the Bitcoin. So the beauty of this is like OTC connects to each other. We can narrow down all the price spreads and doing the trading widely.
So actually, you talked about mining, the quant funds in China. I think just in general, exchanges as well, OTCs. The competition is not, it's a different level to what it was, I guess, a year to 2 years ago. What is FBG kind of thinking about how to differentiate themselves in the space? Anything that you can share on that?
So so recently we are more conservative on the investment side. The ICO we can't say which can be quickly has profitable methodology ICO project. So we are more conservative at the moment. From the OTC and DM side, we see large demanding has increased. So initially half of the clients come from the ICO projects, but half of them are institutional buyers. But nowadays, we see top 20% of our clients are come from like combine the crypto world to traditional world. Take an example of like Libra. They are doing a great job with traditional MO9 and the crypto world. So I think OTC side is increased rapidly because of those innovation bridge line of the traditional crypto.
I have the same question for, I guess, Wayne as well. There's big desks out there that I think they're tightening all their spreads, trying to get as much flow as they can. How does OSL kind of differentiate themselves?
Look, there's certainly been, because we were speaking earlier, there's been a lot more competition come to the space. We certainly anticipated that and spreads compressing and whatnot, but it's probably happened. It's probably happened faster and more severely than I think anyone contemplated at this time last year. But for us, we just stick to what we know how to do. We are an agency-focused business. We don't run principal trading activities. That is, we leave that to the experts. But what we do is we serve customers, and we do that in a very unbiased fashion. We're all about providing products, services, and tools to allow our clients to express their view. And it probably comes as no surprise that we are heavily focused on positioning ourselves for the emerging regulatory environment, not only across Asia but around the rest of the world. Like we have bet that this space is going to become institutionalized. That's a very clear bet we've made, and as such, the way we try to differentiate is by having PwC as our auditor across our firm. We are, in licensing discussions in various jurisdictions. We have complete transparency when it comes to execution and so on. So that's what we don't try and do things we're not good at.
Right. So I mean, more on the institutionalization of it. I want to go back to what Chris mentioned about market makers, manipulation, wash trading. Darius, you get the same requests too, I'm sure. Projects come to you and ask for these shady activities.
Yeah.
What can you do about this?
Yeah. I think completely agree with Chris on this, right? What we've been trying to educate token projects is that there is a fundamental flaw in the structure and the way tokens are traded, right? You're releasing a token, and these guys are paying tons of money to exchanges and to market makers for price discovery, essentially. Because when you release a token, you don't have a sense of intrinsic value, you don't have a sense of fair value of the token, right? They just sort of release it, and then they depend on exchanges to sort of price it and try to create hype and marketing. I mean, that's not how a mature market approaches price discovery. And what we're trying to educate these guys is, instead of just focusing on exchange volatility, why don't you think about issues like establishing fair value, establishing intrinsic value, making sure that there's OTC liquidity, making sure that the depth of liquidity exists in OTC as well, rather than just having it trade on an order book exchange. Why don't you use your balance sheet that you have to try and establish a more robust pricing model, and then the project can work with market makers, OTC, to sort of price that as well, instead of just letting it run wild, right? I think it's an educational process. I'm sure it's the same for you, Chris. And trying to move them to this just pure small exchange mindset to a more sort of holistic approach to pricing the tokens and linking to exchanges.
Sorry, but the general behavior of exchanges. I looked at my phone this morning, not to poo-poo the title sponsor, what market cap. But I was looking at exchanges ranked by volume, adjusted volume. The top 25 exchanges today, by volume, each trade or report trading volume higher than the aggregate of all the U.S. crypto exchanges. How is that even possible? Crypto total market cap is around $130 billion. CoinMarketCap is telling us $32 billion traded in the last 24 hours. Really? 25% of crypto changed hands in the last 24 hours? And I think globally, in stock markets, it's inside of 1%. Gold trades around 1.5%. It's a really ugly fact. It's something that institutional players will look at and scoff at.
I mean, there's a lot of reports out there, so-called third-party neutral organizations that have done research. Yesterday at Drinks, you mentioned that you probably don't even agree with a lot of what they're saying.
Look, I think it's a great start. I think the blockchain transparency report institute guys came up with a better way to measure real exchange liquidity. In recent weeks, different companies have issued other reports. It's a step in the right direction, but when you've been in the trenches for 6 years like we have, we see it in our data. And, even that, the largest crypto exchange in the world, the largest altcoin exchange in the world, we all know that. Nobody calls them out on fake trades. We see it. We've been seeing it for years. I hope to publish something in the next week or two on our blog. We'll just put out the data and let people make what they will. But I think short-term pain for long-term gain. We're better than this.
Let me just add to Christian's point, right? Exactly what we see as well, that I think projects need to understand that the role of exchanges is purely for price discovery. It shouldn't be a case of the be-all end-all of project success, right? There needs to be other strategies considered in order for the space in order for the token trading itself to mature and become more institutional.
So, I mean, I guess it's a controversial kind of statement. There's lots of rumors that exchanges, they have so much power. Any number on their platform doesn't mean the coins are there. They can manipulate that whatever way they want. They can load your account up with so-called USDT or BTC. It doesn't actually mean they have those amount of coins. At the same time, they're able to, essentially they could trade against you. I know certain companies have publicly said that they have a prop desk within the firm, but it's pretty safe to say that these smaller exchanges, especially with low listing fees these days, low volume, don't do anything to make money. And I think this is a really important point that we should all be concerned of. How do we solve that? I don't know if you guys have ideas. Speak to regulators, especially OSL. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the regulation coming up, at least for Hong Kong this year.
Yeah, like all this sort of stuff gets stamped out once it's regulated properly, right? People go to jail very quickly for that sort of behavior. So I kind of think of it like, again, if you cast our mind back to like 12 months ago here, a lot of that spivvy activity, there's probably less than 10% of the people that were here last year, here this year. And these scrupulous practices that may or may not go on. Look, I'm not here to be judge and jury, but this market is becoming regulated, and regulators are pretty smart. They've been looking at this sort of stamping this sort of stuff out in traditional asset classes for a long, long time. And I think for participants in the marketplace, they need to prepare properly, and it'll be much healthier.
Regulators will arrive, but that doesn't mean that those of us who are here for the long run can't self-regulate.
Correct.
We're founding members of the Atom, which is founded in the U.S., but isn't just for the U.S. We've got Galaxy and Cumberland and Genesis on board. The idea is just promote fair and orderly markets, identify bad actors, share that information. And what you're doing is you're creating a roadmap so that when the regulators arrive, they say, well, we may have done it perfectly or not, but at least we followed these steps. This seems to be working, this didn't. And you make your job a little easier. That will come sooner.
Yeah, so it's very unfortunate. I think we had a lot more to share. Unfortunately, time's up. So please feel free to reach out and speak to these gentlemen. They're right at the front of what's happening in terms of trading and volume, so they'll be very valuable to talk to. Thank you everyone for listening, and it's a pleasure. Thanks guys.